The Law of Three. The Law of the Three Principles. Before examining the influences of the various worlds, why the influence of the Absolute does not reach us, and the laws of transformation of unity, we must first examine the fundamental law that creates all phenomena in all the diversity or unity of all universes. This is the Law of Three, the Law of Three Principles or the Three Forces. It consists of the fact that in every phenomenon, on whatever scale and in whatever world it might take place, from molecular or subatomic to cosmic phenomena, it is the result of the combination or meeting of three different and opposing forces. Contemporary thought realizes the existence of two forces and the necessity of these two forces for the production of a phenomenon, namely force and resistance, a positive and negative magnetism, positive and negative electricity, male and female cells, yin and yang, etc. This is dualism. But it does not observe even these two forces always and everywhere. No question has been raised as to the third force, or if it has been raised it has scarcely been heard. According to real and exact knowledge, one force or two forces can never produce a phenomenon. The presence of a third force is necessary, for it is only with the help of a third force that the first two can produce what may be called a phenomenon, no matter in what sphere. The teaching of the three forces is at the root of all ancient systems. The first force may be called active or positive, the second passive or negative, and the third, neutralizing. These, however, are merely names, for in reality all three forces are equally active, and appear only as active, passive or neutralizing at their meeting points alone. This means only in relation to one another at a given moment. The first two forces are more or less comprehensible to us all, and the third may sometimes be discovered either at the point of application of the forces, in the medium of their action, or in the result. Speaking in general, however, third force is not easily accessible to direct observation or understanding. The reason for this is to be found in the functional limitations of our ordinary psychological activity, and in the fundamental categories of our perception of the phenomenal world. That is to say, in our sensation of space and time, resulting from limitations of perception. People are unable to perceive or observe third force directly any more than they can spatially perceive the fourth dimension. By studying ourselves, however, the manifestation of thought, consciousness and activity, our habits, feelings, desires and so on, we can learn to observe, and to see in ourselves the action of these three forces. Suppose then that one wishes to work upon themselves in order to change certain of their characteristics, to attain a higher level of being. Our desire, our initiative is then the active force. The inertia of all our habitual psychological life that shows opposition to this initiative, will be the passive or the negative force. The two forces will either counterbalance one another, or one will completely conquer the other. At the same time the conquering force will become too weak by its effort for any further action. Thus the two forms will as it were eternally revolve one around the other, one absorbing the other and producing no result whatsoever. This may continue for a lifetime. One might feel desire and initiative, however all of this initiative can be absorbed in overcoming the habitual inertia of life, leaving nothing for the purpose towards which the initiative ought to be directed. So it may go on, until third force makes its appearance in the form, for example, of new knowledge, showing immediately the advantage or the necessity of work on oneself, and in this way supporting and strengthening initiative. Then initiative, with the support of this third force, may conquer inertia and the individual becomes active in the desired direction. Examples of the action of three forces and the moments of entry of third force may be discovered in all manifestations of our psychic life. In all the phenomena of the life of human communities, and of humanity as a whole, in the phenomena of nature around us. However, to begin with, it is enough to understand the general principle: every phenomena of whatever magnitude it might be, is inevitably the manifestation of three forces. One or two cannot produce a phenomenon, and if we observe a stoppage in anything, or an endless hesitation at the same place, then we can say that at that given point, third force is lacking. In trying to understand this, it must be remembered at the same time, that people cannot observe phenomena as manifestations of three forces, because we cannot observe the objective world in our subjective state of consciousness. In the subjectively observed phenomenal world, we see in phenomena only the manifestation of one or two forces. If we could see the manifestation of three forces in every action, we would then see the world as it is, or things in themselves. It must also be remembered that a phenomenon that appears to be simple, may actually be very complicated. That is, it may be a very complex combination of trinities. We know that we cannot observe the world as it is, so this should help us to understand why we cannot see third force. Third force is a property of the real world. The subjective or phenomenal world of our observation is only relatively real, and is at the very least incomplete. Returning to the world in which we live, we may now say that in the absolute, as well as in everything else, three forces are active: the active, passive and the neutralizing. However, since by its very nature everything in the Absolute constitutes one whole, then the three forces must also constitute one whole. Furthermore, in forming one independent whole, the three forces possess a full and independent will, full consciousness, full understanding of themselves and of everything that they do. The idea of the unity of three forces in the Absolute forms the basis of many ancient teachings, a consubstantial and indivisible trinity, triquetra, trimurti. Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, etc. The three forces of the Absolute constitute one whole, separate and united by their own will, and by their own decision. Creating at the points of junction, phenomena or worlds. These worlds, created by the will of the Absolute, depend entirely upon this will in everything that concerns their existence. In each of these worlds, the three forces again act. Since, however, each of these worlds is now not the whole, but only some part, then the three forces in them do not form a single whole. Each of the three forces contains within it the possibility of all three forces, but at the meeting point of the three forces, each of them manifests only one principle: the active, the passive or the neutralizing. The three forces together form a trinity that produces new phenomena. However, this trinity is different. It is not that which was in the Absolute, where the three forces formed an indivisible whole and possessed one single will and one single consciousness. In the worlds of the second order, the three forces are now divided, and their meeting points are of a different nature. In the Absolute, the moment and the point of their meeting is determined by singular will. In the worlds of the second order, where there is no longer a single will but three wills, the points of issue are each determined by a separate will, independent of the others, and therefore the meeting point becomes either accidental or mechanical. The will of the Absolute creates the worlds of the second order, and governs them, but it does not govern their creative work, in which a mechanical element makes its appearance. We can now imagine the Absolute as a circle, and in it a number of other circles, worlds of the second order. Then take for example one of these secondary circles. The Absolute is designated by the number 1, because the three forces constitute one whole in the Absolute, and the smaller circles will be designated by the number 3, because in a world of the second order the three forces are already divided. The three divided forces in the worlds of the second order, meeting together in each of these worlds, then create new worlds of the third order. Let us now take one of these worlds. The worlds of the third order, created by the three forces that act semi-mechanically, no longer depend upon the single will of the Absolute, but upon three mechanical laws. Three forces create these worlds, and having been created they manifest three new forces of their own. Thus the number of forces acting in the worlds of the third order will be 6. In our diagram the circle of the third order is thus designated by the number 6, or 3 plus 3. In these worlds are created worlds of a new order, the fourth order. In the worlds of the fourth order there act 3 forces of the world of the second order, 6 forces of the world of the third order and 3 of their own. 12 forces altogether. We can therefore take one of these worlds and designate it by the number 12. 3 plus 6 plus 3. Being subject to a greater number of laws, these worlds stand still further away from the single will of the Absolute, and are still more mechanical. The worlds created within these worlds will be governed by 24 forces, 3 plus 6, plus 12, plus 3. The worlds then created within these worlds will be governed by 48 forces, the number 48 being made up as follows: 3 forces of the world immediately following the Absolute, 6 of the next one, 12 of the next, 24 of the one after that, and then 3 of its own. 3 plus 6, plus 12, plus 24, plus 3, 48 in all. Worlds created within world 48 will be governed by 96 forces, 3 plus 6, plus 12, plus 24, plus 48, plus 3. The worlds of the next order, if there are any, will be governed by 192 forces, and so on. If we take one of the many worlds created in the Absolute, that is world 3, it will be the world representing the total number of starry worlds similar to our Milky Way. If we take world 6, it will be one of the worlds created within this world, namely the accumulation of stars that we call the Milky Way. World 12 will be one of the suns that compose the Milky Way, our Sun for example. World 24 will be the planetary world, that is to say, all the planets of our solar system. World 48 will be the Earth. World 96 will be the Moon, and if the Moon had a satellite, it would be World 192, and so on. The chain of worlds, the links of which the Absolute is comprised. All worlds, all suns, our Sun, the planets, the Earth and the Moon, form the ray of creation, in which we find ourselves. This ray of creation is for us, the world in the widest sense of the term. This ray of creation does not of course include the world in the full sense of the term, since the Absolute gives birth to a number, perhaps to an infinite number of different worlds, each of which begins a new and separate ray of creation. Furthermore, each of these worlds contains a number of worlds representing a further breaking up of that ray, and again of these worlds we select only one, our Milky Way. The Milky Way consists of a number of suns, but of this number we select one sun which is nearest to us, upon which we immediately depend and in which we live and move and have our being. Each of the other suns means a new breaking up of the ray. However, we cannot study these rays in the same way that we study our ray, which is the ray in which we are situated. Furthermore, within the solar system, the planetary world is nearer to us than the sun itself, and within that planetary world, the nearest of all to us is the Earth, the planet upon which we live. We have no need therefore to study other planets in the same way as we study the Earth. It is sufficient for us to take them all together, that is to say on a considerably smaller scale than we take the Earth. The number of forces in each world, 1, 3, 6, 12 and so on, indicates the number of laws to which that world is subject. The fewer laws there are in a given world, the nearer that world then is to the will of the Absolute. The more laws there are in any given world, the greater the mechanicalness, the further it is from the will of the Absolute. We live in a world subject to 48 orders of laws, that is to say, very far from the will of the Absolute and in a very remote and dark corner of the universe. In this way, the ray of creation helps us to determine and to realize our place in the world. However, as we shall see, we have not yet come to questions about influences. In order to understand the difference between the influences of various worlds, we must better understand the law of three and then further on, still another fundamental law, the law of seven, or the law of octaves.